This is our third video that we are uploading to our site regarding grading and feedback and how we as a school are communicating with parents. So if you haven't viewed the first two videos, you might want to check those out before viewing this third video. In Milan Middle School this year, we've seen lots and lots of success. Our students are growing, they're flourishing. The conversations that we're having with students and with parents are changing, and it's something that we're extremely excited about. We've done a lot of research, we've done a lot of studies on how to continue to enhance things and how to continue to make things better, and that's what we're constantly about. We're not about embracing the status quo. We're not about embracing our successes from the past, because our successes for tomorrow are going to be an even bigger challenge than our successes for today, or what defined us as a success yesterday. One of the things that we've had multiple conversations with parents about recently are the ideas of retakes and timelines, due dates. In our world, we call them arbitrary deadlines. In traditional schools, in traditional models, what would take place was a teacher would spend 2 or 3 weeks teaching a concept. They would plan ahead, place a date on the board, and tell all the students that on that predetermined date, they were all going to be tested on a given piece of knowledge, that the students had a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever the time was, to study and to prepare, and that by that date, they had to have mastery of whatever concept was taught. That's not the way we do things anymore, and there are a lot of reasons behind it. I don't know that I'll have necessarily the time to go into all of the reasons behind it, but I'll share some of them today. Here at Milan Middle School, we take that traditional model and we basically flip it upside down. It used to be that teachers would instruct and then assess. We now use the model of assessment before and during and after instruction. Assessment comes first. I call it the chicken and the egg paradox of education. The old story of what came first, the chicken or the egg. Here at Milan Middle School, we ask the question constantly, what comes first, the assessment or the instruction? With the idea of instruction coming before assessment, the old model, teachers walked in with the preconceived notion that all students entered at the same place, that all students needed the same instruction, that all students needed the same guidance, and that no students could possibly perform well on an assessment or a test or quiz, whatever terminology you wanted to use, unless the teacher taught them. But we know that's not the case. We know that no two students walk into a classroom with the same backgrounds, with the same experiences, and therefore it's unrealistic for us to expect them all to gain the same level of knowledge, the same level of mastery on the same arbitrary date. Using the example from early on, a teacher teaches the concepts for a couple of weeks and then picks a date that's convenient to the teacher out into the future and says, I'm going to test the kids on, say, a Wednesday. Why Wednesday? Why is that date the date that students have to have mastery of a concept? I've got multiple kids at home, 3 kids at home, and I know for a fact that none of my kids have ever mastered any given skill on the exact same date, ever. One kid learned how to walk on date X, another one learned how to walk on date Y. Every single kid is different. In schools, though, we change that up for some reason. We say that everybody has to master learning on the same date, and that's just not the way it works. Here at Milan Middle School, we have tried our best to eliminate as many arbitrary deadlines, as many arbitrary dates as possible. We want to give kids as much opportunity to learn and to grow as possible. Using the example of my own kids, I currently have a 10-month-old at home. He's my youngest child. And he's in the process right now of learning how to walk. Does he know how to walk yet? No. Is he a complete failure? No. He's in the process of learning how to walk. There are times he'll stand up and he'll wobble for 5, 6, 7 seconds, try to take a step, and fall down. Do I look at him and say, you're a failure, you're not a walker, sorry, and slap a big F on his forehead and call him a failure? Absolutely not. But on the flip side, I also don't call him successful and say, you've mastered it, you know how to walk. I don't tell him, hey, you have to learn how to walk by this Friday, or I'm giving up on you and we're moving on to another skill. If you don't know how to walk by Friday, tough luck, you'll never be a walker, I'm going to start teaching your ABCs. Absolutely not. I'm going to give him as much time as he needs and as much guidance and encouragement as possible. We try to do the same thing here. And I've heard people tell me, well, in the real world, you do have deadlines. Like, yeah, absolutely, I agree. We have deadlines here as well. I've heard people say, well, in the real world, you don't get to take retakes. You don't get multiple chances to show that you're successful. You don't get multiple chances to take a test. I actually completely disagree with that. Think about the real world. What are some of the tests you have to take in the real world? Okay, let's just start with some of the basics. Driver's ed. Driver's ed, at the completion of driver's ed or a driver's license test, what happens if you fail it? Do they cut up your license and say, you'll never drive again? No. They say, okay, you'll have to come back and retake the test. What if you take the ACT or the SAT to try to get into college and you don't do well? Can you take them again? Yeah, absolutely you can. The only place where we don't allow retakes is in school, which doesn't really make sense. If the job of a school is to prepare kids for later on in life, we need to allow them to experience the same things later on in life. Now, later on in life, you do poorly on a test, and you want to retake the test. Are there costs involved? Absolutely. Are there consequences involved? Absolutely. Are we saying that in schools, students necessarily shouldn't have consequences or costs involved with having to demonstrate knowledge at a later date? Absolutely not. Sometimes there are costs involved. Sometimes it does become inconvenient. Here at Milan Middle School, we've made it a concerted effort to have our grades be a reflection of evidence of knowledge obtained. All a grade is a reflection of, as of this date, this snapshot moment in time, here's the evidence that we've collected to demonstrate your level of knowledge. If on today's date you have not demonstrated a level of knowledge or haven't produced evidence of your knowledge, you might have to come in at an inconvenient time to prove that you've got evidence. You might have to come in at lunch after school. You might have to do a few more practice tasks to get that opportunity to show evidence at a later date. That's fine. But ultimately, we're going to give you as many chances to gain that knowledge as possible. Because we're not going to give up on a kid because we have arbitrarily picked a date out of thin air and said, this is the date you have to have mastery of it. We get rid of as many arbitrary deadlines as possible. And we've all heard the story of Michael Jordan, for example, and how Michael Jordan was cut from his freshman basketball team. It's one of those stories that we hear over and over and over again, and everybody uses it to teach and to preach from. But just think about it this way. What if NBA scouts had been there on the day of Michael Jordan's freshman basketball tryout? And on that date, when he was in ninth grade, 14, 15 years old, the NBA scout said, yep, he's never going to be a basketball player, and write him off. We would have never heard of him. We would never know that he's one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And likewise, what if Michael Jordan had taken that defeat, that failure, if you will, and used it to identify himself and said, well, I'm a failure. What if his parents would have looked at him and said, you're a failure. Your coaches said that you failed. We're giving up. No, they did not use that as a definition for who he was, what he was capable of. They saw it as an opportunity for growth and progress. And because of that, he continued to work hard. So as parents, when we see those definitions or those grades that define evidence collected as not complete, not adequate, in our grading scale it would be a 2 out of 4, a 1 out of 4, a C, a D, something along those lines. Some of us are tempted to look at that and say, my kid is a failure. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. Others of us might look at it and say, that's an opportunity for growth. That's an opportunity of identified weakness as of today. And then as a parent, I can take some ownership and say, what can I do to motivate and inspire and to push my child to achieve greatness? Teachers are able to do the same thing. They see a child who's not successful today, and they're now able to continue to cater instruction to help that kid be successful tomorrow. Our goal isn't necessarily to make kids that are masters of today. We want kids that are going to be successful tomorrow.